everyone. Today we're talking about Wheeshte, Creative Making in Uncertain Times by Kate Davies. And I'm here with Linda from Color Storms Yarns. And today we're talking about the Within Limits chapter.
Chapter 3. Yeah, we're going to finish that up today. The homework that I did was I wrote 2 haikus.
Oh, very nice.
And wrote a list of my limitations. And then she talks about, what do you think about the idea that even handicapped people, not only handicapped people have limitations, but we all have limitations, just some of us haven't found them yet. And I remember that thought first came up. I don't know if you remember that cute little movie a long time ago called Butterflies Are Free.
I've never heard of that. I'll have to Google it.
It's a very cute movie about a blind man who makes friends with a seeing woman, and they have a romance, and these sorts of ideas are explored. And so it was kind of a new idea in its time, probably made back in the 70s, really sweet. So I think, the idea of being aware of my limitations certainly has been something I've thought about for many years. And certainly I understand I'm operating my small business with many limitations, limited funds, limited energy. I'm not a person who focuses really well. And this week I ran out of blue, so I couldn't dye anything blue, the opposite of Picasso's problem, right? So I had to dye I had to dye my jeweled colors. I couldn't make any more blue or green. So it's all been good. I think I've made peace with my limitations and learned to reach out for help more often. I think when I was young, I had a harder time with that.
That's an interesting idea, like knowing when to ask for help and how to ask for help and who to ask for help from. Like, sometimes it's hard for me to identify when I need help, and then it's also hard to know who to ask.
Yep.
Yeah. I was thinking about knitting brioche has always been, it's a challenge for me. It's always been very difficult. I've had a mental block about the whole idea and concept, and it's not something that I have enjoyed ever. And I think it kind of has to go back to the very first experience that I had with brioche, and it was probably not the best teaching situation. The teacher wasn't a good match for me. Like, I'm sure that she was a good teacher, but at that moment, it wasn't what worked for me. And so that sort of created this invisible wall about the whole subject. And even though I love how brioche looks, I knew I didn't like making it. So then it was like an immediate, like, cross that off the list without even giving it a chance.
I tried it. I don't like it. I don't need to do it again.
Yeah, even though I really like the knitted fabric and the result. So that's been an evolution over many, many years for me.
Do you think you ever want to try it again, maybe with a book or with a friend? Or
so I have tried it again.
Oh,
more than once, and every time I've tried it, I feel like I've gotten the same result, like, oh, this isn't for me. But I tried it again this week just to sort of see what happens, and I'm pleasantly surprised at the result, and it even almost made sense to me. And so that's been really interesting.
Oh, congratulations on your success.
Yeah, because it's a total unexpected result.
Great. Yeah, I've got a brioche project in my lineup, but I haven't, and I've had it in my lineup for a couple years now.
Yeah.
It's like a it's called the brioche lockdown sampler, because I've done small projects. I felt like maybe it was time for me to try lots of new stitches with it, but I've been slow to go back to it too. It's not an easy knit, I think. And you have to be, maybe your brain has to be in the right place to take that on. So would you like me to read one of my haikus?
I love that. Yes. Let's hear it.
Well, I feel like for poems, you have to have a powerful emotion to get a poem started. And I wasn't sure last week if I was there yet, but this week I definitely was. I've had two people come to me with some pretty serious problems. And this is what it feels like when two people I really love are struggling with something very difficult. My poem is called Painful Watch. Friend, agony, split, listen, wait, pray, hoping, unknown outcome, strong. And kind of to go with that, like the next day I wrote this one, and it sort of plays off that. It's called Daily Life. Like you said, 17 syllables is very doable. It's like, okay, I can do this. The second poem is called Daily Life. Full to empty, poured. Needed, chores, tasks unending. Rest, knit, pray, friendships. So that's how the second poem is kind of how I'm getting through the first poem.
Yeah, like you can tell that the poems are related, but they do express different things. It's very interesting.
Oh, well, thanks, sir. It is whatever. It's a
Thank
little
you for
itty
sharing.
It's a little itty bitty dump, right?
Yeah.
Itty. There. You can put your life in a nutshell, right? Here's my life in a nutshell.
Yeah.
15 syllables. I kind of like that idea. You can almost put that on a gravestone.
I'm sure.
Okay, we're digressing. Any further thoughts on this wonderful chapter of limitations? I loved it.
Yeah, I really like it too. And for me, I'm thinking about the idea of like invisible rules also, which create limitations that are maybe self-imposed.
Oh, yeah.
And like, is it true that like that rule exists? Or I mean, I know for me, like there's things in my life that I feel like have to be done in a certain order because it's a habit or it's a approach. Maybe at one point it was a really good tool to use to get something done, but maybe I've outgrown that invisible rule or the sequence. And like, an easy example is some people I know have to cook with a clean kitchen. Like they can't start cooking until the kitchen is cleaned. And I'm sure we've all, it's a good rule of thumb, right? Because it's easier to make dinner in a tidy space. But maybe cleaning the kitchen just makes you start dinner at a later point in time, and then it pushes the whole eating to a later time, and then at some point you're
Yeah, it's not 100% necessary, you're asking yourself?
yeah, I mean, in this example of like cooking with a clean kitchen, like maybe that's an invisible rule, even though it's a preference.
Right.
And like how much work has to go into the tidy kitchen before you start cooking. Like maybe there are some shifts that can happen earlier in the day or the night before.
Tiny shifts, I think those are a great idea. Tiny shifts sometimes can take something that feels immovable, and just with a tiny shift, it can become more doable, less annoying, or something the other partner can see a way to agree to, or something. I like
Yeah,
that
I mean,
concept of tiny shift.
yeah.
It can be creative too, right? It's like a haiku. If you have a tiny
Yeah.
shift, maybe that's not so intimidating. Let's just have some creative brainstorming on what tiny shift can happen to make this impossible problem a little more unmanageable. That's the,
Yeah. It's
I like it.
it's really interesting. So this chapter for me was thought provoking. I definitely was thinking about things in a different way. And sometimes putting things in a category helps our brain to like keep everything straight and the structure, but then also is that structure creating limits that
Unnecessarily.
that like prevent us from evolving or finding a solution in a different way.
Right. So it's maybe a good way to end this chapter, that there's a
Yeah.
value in limitations, but sometimes we create limitations artificially that aren't necessary. And with a tiny shift, you can open things up. So I like that.
Great. Well, then next week we're going to start on chapter 4, and it's called Mess Up.
Oh, great. Thanks for joining us in Wheeshte, creative making in uncertain times. Keep those creative juices flowing and see what amazing things happen this week for you.